Frank's cologne still lingers on my cardigan, the one I wore to our last coffee meeting before his wife destroyed everything. I press the fabric to my face and breathe deep, trying to capture what's left of him, what's left of us. My therapist says this is unhealthy, that I need to let go. But how do you let go of the one person who understood you when your own husband spent 11 years looking right through you? Ruben's at his new apartment now, probably with her, the dental hygienist he met 3 months after our separation. 3 months. That's all it took for him to replace 11 years of marriage, 11 years of me trying to fit into his narrow little world of church potlucks and missionary fundraisers, and conversations about paint colors for the nursery we'd never need because he was always too tired, too stressed, too focused on his accounting firm to actually touch me. But I'm the villain in this story. At least that's what they whisper over lukewarm coffee in the fellowship hall at First Baptist Buffalo, between prayer requests and pitying glances they think I don't see. Miranda the homewrecker, Miranda the adulteress, Miranda who threw away a good marriage for some workplace fling. They don't know Frank. They don't know what it's like to finally have someone see you as more than just Ruben's wife, more than just another face in the church choir. Let me tell you how a good Christian wife ends up in therapy, mourning a man who was never hers while her husband tells everyone she's the reason their marriage failed. Ruben and I met when we were 19 at a Wednesday night Bible study. He was studying accounting at Canisius College. I was majoring in communications at Buffalo State. He wore pressed khakis to a college group meeting. That should have been my first warning sign. But I was raised in the church, taught that a godly man was the ultimate prize, and Ruben checked every box. He didn't drink, didn't swear, called his mother every Sunday after service. We dated for 4 years before he proposed. 4 careful chaperoned years where holding hands felt scandalous, and our first kiss was at the altar. My friends who weren't in the church thought I was insane. "You're marrying someone you've never even slept with?" they'd ask. But that's how it was supposed to be. Pure, holy, blessed by God. The wedding night was awkward. Of course it was. 2 virgins fumbling in a Niagara Falls hotel room trying to figure out what went where while still feeling guilty about the whole thing. Ruben actually prayed before we did it. I lay there in my white negligee listening to him thank God for the gift of marriage, while I wondered if this was really how everyone started there forever. But we figured it out. Sort of. Sex became another item on Ruben's carefully organized schedule. Tuesday and Saturday nights, lights off, missionary position, always initiated by him reaching over and placing his hand on my hip. No words, no passion, just that hand, like a parking meter reset. Paid up for another few days. The first few years were fine. We bought a house in Amherst, close enough to both our jobs, but far enough from downtown that Ruben felt safe. I worked at a local marketing firm, nothing glamorous, but it paid well enough. Ruben made partner at his accounting firm by 28. Everyone at church called us the golden couple, so stable, so blessed. By year 5, the cracks started showing. Or maybe they'd always been there and I just finally noticed. Ruben had no interest in anything outside his routine. Work, home, church, repeat. Date nights became quarterly obligations where we'd go to the same 3 restaurants and talk about the same 3 topics: his job, our families, church gossip. When I suggested trying something new, maybe driving to Toronto for a weekend, he'd look at me like I'd suggested robbing a bank. "Why would we do that?" he'd ask. "We have everything we need here." Everything he needed, maybe. But I was drowning in beige walls and meal plans and sex that lasted exactly 12 minutes because Ruben had it down to a science. I tried talking to him about it. Bought books about marriage, suggested counseling, even tried to spice things up in the bedroom. You should have seen his face when I bought lingerie that wasn't white. You'd think I'd brought home porn. "That's not really appropriate for a married Christian woman," he said, not even looking at the red lace I'd spent $40 on. "We're married, Ruben." "God's not going to strike us down for having good sex." "We have perfectly fine sex." Perfectly fine. That summed up our entire marriage. He said it with satisfaction, like perfectly fine was the goal all along. As if fine was the destination, not the warning sign. Not great, not terrible, just fine. Then I got the job at CompuWare Technologies in May 2023. It was supposed to be a fresh start, better pay, room for advancement, a chance to work on real campaigns instead of ads for local mattress stores. Ruben wasn't thrilled. The commute was longer, the hours less predictable. But the salary increase meant we could finally renovate the kitchen, so he agreed. My first day, I met Frank. He was running new employee orientation, making jokes about the coffee machine that probably violated several HR policies but had everyone laughing anyway. Frank was everything Ruben wasn't. Loud where Ruben was quiet. Spontaneous where Ruben was methodical. He wore jeans to work and had tattoos peeking out from under his dress shirt, and cursed like it was punctuation. He smelled like cedar and something sharp, and when he laughed, it was the kind of sound that made you want to be the reason. "You're going to love it here," he told me during lunch that first day. "We work hard, but we actually have fun too. Not like those corporate drones downtown." I wanted to tell him I was married to one of those corporate drones, but I didn't. Instead, I laughed and let him show me all the best places to grab coffee near the office. Frank was married too. Had been for about as long as Ruben and I. His wife Sarah was a nurse, worked crazy hours at Buffalo General. He'd mention her sometimes, casual comments about her schedule or their weekend plans, but never with the reverence Ruben used when talking about me to others. Like I was some prize he'd won at the church raffle. The friendship started innocent enough. Coffee runs, lunch when our schedules aligned, the occasional after-work drink with the team. Frank was easy to talk to. He actually listened when I spoke, asked follow-up questions, remembered things I'd mentioned weeks later. When I told him about my weekend plans, he didn't just nod and go back to his spreadsheets like Ruben did. "Your husband sounds intense," he said one day after I'd vented about Ruben's reaction to me suggesting we skip church for a weekend trip to Toronto. "He's just traditional or controlling." "It's not like that. He just likes routine." "And you don't?" I didn't answer, but Frank saw right through me. He always did. By fall, I was looking forward to work more than home. The marketing team at CompuWare was young, creative, nothing like the stuffy environment I'd left. They went out after work, had inside jokes, actually enjoyed each other's company. And Frank was at the center of it all, the social coordinator who made sure everyone felt included. "You should come to happy hour with us Friday," he suggested one October afternoon. "The whole team's going." "I can't. Ruben likes me home by 6 for dinner." "Likes you home? What are you, a teenager with a curfew?" "It's not like that," I said again, but it was starting to sound exactly like that. I went to happy hour. Told Ruben I had to work late, which was partly true. We did discuss the Henderson campaign over margaritas, but mostly we just laughed, and I remembered what it felt like to be 25 and alive instead of 30, and slowly fossilizing in a suburban prison. Frank walked me to my car after. The October air was crisp, leaves crunching under our feet, and for a moment I felt like I was in college again, young and full of possibilities. "Thanks for coming out," he said. "It's good to see you outside the office fluorescents. You look different." "Different how?" "Happy." The word hung between us, heavy with everything I couldn't say. That I wasn't happy, hadn't been for years. That coming to work was the highlight of my day because it meant seeing him. It was a dangerous realization. "I should go," I said instead. "Yeah, me too. Sarah's probably wondering where I am." But neither of us moved. We stood there in the parking lot, breath visible in the cold air, and I knew we were crossing a line just by lingering. It was a dangerous moment. Good Christian wives don't stand in dark parking lots with men who aren't their husbands, feeling things they shouldn't feel. I went home to Ruben, who barely looked up from his laptop when I walked in. Dinner was in the oven. He'd made his mother's tuna casserole, same recipe we'd had every Thursday for 11 years. We ate in silence, Him reading quarterly reports while I pushed noodles around my plate and thought about Frank saying I looked happy. The real shift happened in December, the company Christmas party. Spouses were invited, and I spent weeks dreading it. Reuben in his pressed khakis among my coworkers with their tattoos and their casual profanity and their ability to have fun without checking their watches every 15 minutes. But Reuben surprised me. He mingled, made appropriate small talk, even laughed at Jeremy's inappropriate joke about the accounting department. I started to relax, thinking maybe I'd underestimated him. Maybe he could fit into my world after all. Then Frank walked over with Sarah. I'd built her up in my mind as some supermodel nurse, the kind of woman who could keep a man like Frank satisfied. But Sarah was ordinary. Pretty enough, but tired-looking, like her 12-hour shifts were written on her face. She shook hands politely, made the required nice-to-meet-yous, then spent the rest of the party on her phone while Frank tried to include her in conversations. "Your husband seems nice," Frank said when we ended up alone by the dessert table. "He is nice," I agreed, watching Reuben explain tax law to my confused coworker. "Very nice. That sounds like a ringing endorsement." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just nice is what you say about weather, not marriages." "And how would you describe yours?" Frank glanced at Sarah, still absorbed in her phone. "Functional." He said the word like it was a diagnosis. Another line crossed. Married people don't admit their marriages are just functional to other married people they have chemistry with. But there it was, out in the open. This truth that we were both settling for lives that looked good on paper, but felt like death by 1,000 paper cuts. A door cracking open that should have stayed bolted shut. A door cracking open that should have stayed bolted shut. January changed everything. That's when I started my coffee dates. It was innocent, I swear. I've always been someone who likes to really know her coworkers, and one-on-one conversations over coffee were just my way of building relationships. I'd done it at every job, and Reuben had never cared before. Probably because before, my coworkers had been middle-aged women talking about their grandkids, not attractive men with tattoos and easy smiles. "I'm grabbing coffee with Frank after work," I mentioned one Tuesday morning. "Just want to pick his brain about the Morrison campaign." Reuben looked up from his oatmeal. "Frank? The guy from the Christmas party?" "Yeah, my coworker. The one with the tattoos. Does that matter?" "I'm just trying to place him. Seemed different from your usual colleagues. That's because my usual colleagues were boring." "There's nothing wrong with boring, Miranda. Boring is stable. Boring is safe." "Boring is boring, Reuben." He went back to his oatmeal, and I went to work, where Frank was anything but boring. Our coffee dates became a weekly thing, always under the pretense of work, always in public places, always completely appropriate if you didn't count the way my pulse quickened when he smiled, or how he started texting me funny memes during the day that made me laugh in meetings. "My wife thinks I'm having an emotional affair," he told me one day in February, completely out of the blue. I nearly choked on my latte. "What?" "Sarah, she saw our text thread, got upset about all the messages." "But we're just friends." "I know that, you know that. She's not convinced." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're married, I'm married, we work together, end of story." "And she believed you?" "Not really." "But she works 70 hours a week, so she doesn't have the energy to fight about it." I should have felt guilty, should have offered to stop the coffee dates, stop the texts, create proper boundaries. Instead, I felt thrilled. Sarah saw me as a threat. Me, boring Miranda from church who'd never even kissed anyone besides her husband. "Reuben doesn't know about the coffee," I admitted. "Why not?" "He wouldn't understand." "He thinks men and women can't be friends. Can they?" Frank looked at me over his coffee cup, and I knew the answer. Number. Not when the friend made you feel more alive than your husband had in years. Not when you counted the hours until your next coffee date. Not when you saved his texts to reread when Ruben was snoring beside you. March was when it all went to hell. We were supposed to get coffee that Wednesday, but Frank canceled last minute. Family emergency, he said. I tried not to feel disappointed, but I'd bought a new dress specifically for our meetup. Nothing scandalous, just something that actually fit instead of the shapeless cardigans Ruben preferred. That night, Frank called me. Actually called, which he'd never done before. "I need to tell you something," he said, and I could hear the weight in his voice. "What's wrong?" "Sarah found out we share locations." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about that. We'd shared locations months ago when we were coordinating a client meeting. Never turned it off. "She went ballistic," he continued. "Accused me of tracking you, stalking you. Said the only reason to share locations with a female coworker is if you're fucking her." The word made me flinch. Good Christian wives don't hear that word directed at them, even secondhand. "What did you tell her?" I told her she was being paranoid. That it was from a work thing, but what? She gave me an ultimatum. End the friendship or end the marriage. The world tilted. "What are you going to do?" Silence. Long enough that I knew the answer before he said it. "I have to try to save my marriage, Miranda." "I'm sorry." "No, I understand, of course, your marriage comes first. This doesn't change how I feel about you. Frank, don't—" "I'm in love with you." The words I'd wanted to hear and couldn't bear to hear all at once. Because what good did it do now? He was choosing Sarah. Choosing his functional marriage over whatever this thing between us had become. Just like that. Over a phone call. "I have to go," I whispered. "Miranda." I hung up. Sat in my car in our driveway, watching Ruben through the window as he sat in his recliner, probably reading his daily devotional, completely unaware that his wife's heart was breaking over another man. The next day at work was torture. Frank avoiding eye contact in meetings, me pretending to care about campaigns and demographics when all I wanted to do was scream. This was what heartbreak felt like. Real heartbreak. Not the dull ache of a marriage slowly dying, but the sharp agony of losing something that had made you feel alive. I lasted 3 days before I broke down completely. Called in sick to work, told Ruben I had a migraine, and spent the day sobbing in bed. How had I let this happen? How had coffee dates and text messages turned into me crying over a man who wasn't my husband? "Maybe you should see someone," Ruben suggested that weekend, finding me crying in the bathroom for the 3rd time. "A counselor or therapist. This seems like more than just work stress." He had no idea how right he was. But I couldn't tell him the truth. That I was mourning the loss of a man I'd never even kissed. That Frank had made me feel seen in ways Ruben never had. That our marriage had been over long before Frank showed up, but I'd been too comfortable in my misery to notice. So I went to therapy. Started in April, twice a week with Dr. Martinez downtown. Told her everything. About the coffee dates, the texts, the way Frank looked at me like I was something special instead of just perfectly fine. "It sounds like you're grieving," she said during our 3rd session. "How can I grieve something I never really had?" Emotional connections are real, even without physical intimacy. You're grieving the loss of that connection, the possibility of what could have been. He chose his wife. And what are you choosing? I didn't have an answer. I went home to Ruben, ate tuna casserole, had our scheduled Tuesday night sex, and felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Like I'd died inside and no one bothered to hold a funeral. May was when Ruben started to notice. Really notice. The weight I'd lost, the way I flinched when he touched me, how I'd stopped planning our usual summer vacation to Virginia Beach. "Are you happy?" he asked one night, completely out of nowhere. "What?" "In our marriage." "Are you happy?" I should have lied. Should have said yes, of course, just tired from work. Instead, I told the truth. "No." He nodded like he'd expected it. Is there someone else? No, I said, and it wasn't really a lie. Frank had made his choice. There was no one else, just the memory of someone else. Do you want to work on us? I don't know. That's not an answer, Miranda. Yes, it is. It's the only honest answer I have. We tried counseling, went to the pastor first, who told me I needed to submit more to my husband's leadership, and suggested Reuben be more attentive to my emotional needs. Went to an actual therapist next, who at least didn't quote scripture at us but couldn't fix what had been broken for years. You don't love me, Reuben said after our 4th session in June. I do love you. You love the idea of me, the stability, the safety, but you don't love me. He was right. I loved Reuben the way you love a comfortable pair of shoes. Reliable, familiar, but not something that made your heart race. Is this about Frank? The name hit me like a slap in a confessional booth. Shame, shock, exposure, all in one syllable. What? Your coworker, the one you were getting coffee with, Sarah Martinez, called me. The room spun. When? 2 months ago. Said her husband was having an emotional affair with a coworker named Miranda. Didn't take a detective to figure out who that was. Why didn't you say anything? I was waiting for you to tell me. To choose us, but you never did. There's nothing to tell. We were friends. It's over. Is it? Number. It wasn't over. It would never be over. I'd carry Frank with me forever, this reminder that I was capable of feeling more than I'd ever felt with Reuben. But I couldn't say that. I need space, I said instead. What kind of space? The kind where you move out. Reuben packed that night, methodical as always, folding his khakis just so, organizing his toiletries in labeled bags. I watched from the doorway, waiting to feel something. Regret, sadness, fear. Instead, I felt relief. I'll stay at my brother's, he said. We can figure out the details later. Okay. I loved you, Miranda. I want you to know that. I loved you the best way I knew how. I know. It just wasn't enough. No, it wasn't. He left with 3 suitcases and 11 years of marriage condensed into a business-like discussion about who would keep the house. I stood in our empty bedroom, still smelling like his cologne and my tears, and thought about texting Frank. Just to let him know. Just to see if maybe... But I didn't. Because Frank had chosen his marriage and I'd destroyed mine, and sometimes that's just how stories end. July made it official. Reuben filed for separation, moved into an apartment near his office. I kept the house, but couldn't afford it on my own. Started looking for something smaller, somewhere that didn't have memories in every corner. That's when everyone found out. Church people have a radar for marital discord, and suddenly I was getting calls from every prayer warrior in the congregation. Reuben, smart man that he was, had gotten ahead of the story. Told everyone he'd tried to save our marriage, but I'd given up. Convenient how he left out the part about me being dead inside for years before Frank ever showed up. I heard about you and Reuben, Marcy from choir said, cornering me after service. Such a shame. He's such a good man. Yes, he is. Is it true you were having an affair? I need to go. But there was nowhere to go. The story had spread like wildfire. Miranda the adulterer, Miranda who threw away a perfectly good marriage for some tattooed coworker. Never mind that nothing physical had happened. In church world, emotional affairs were almost worse. At least with physical affairs, you could blame the flesh. Emotional affairs meant your heart had betrayed your vows. I stopped going to church. Started spending Sundays at coffee shops, reading books Reuben would have called inappropriate, wearing clothes that showed my shoulders. Small rebellions, but they felt revolutionary after 11 years of modest dresses and daily devotionals. Work was awkward. Frank's still there, but not there. We'd nod in hallways, sit on opposite sides in meetings, pretend we were strangers who hadn't confessed love in March. The team noticed, of course. The invitations to happy hour stopped. I became just another coworker instead of part of the group. August was when I made the mistake. Ran into Frank at Wegmans, both of us reaching for the same avocado. A rom-com meet-cute in the produce section, except we'd already had our story and it hadn't ended well. "Hi," he said. "Hi. How are you?" "Getting divorced." His face went pale. "Miranda, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "It's not your fault." "It was over before you. You just helped me see it." "Still?" We stood there, holding our avocados like it was some twisted sacrament. And I wanted to kiss him so badly it physically hurt. Wanted to know if his lips were as soft as I'd imagined during all those coffee dates. Like a guilty teenager. Wanted to be the kind of woman who kissed men in grocery stores instead of the kind who'd married her first boyfriend and called it good enough. I wanted to believe I was still the exception, not just another chapter in Frank's recycled story. "I miss you," he said quietly. "Don't." "I do, though. Every day." "You chose Sarah." "I chose wrong." "Did you?" He didn't answer. We went our separate ways, him back to his functional marriage, me back to my empty house. But something had shifted. The door I'd thought was closed had cracked open, and hope was a dangerous thing for a woman in the middle of a divorce. September brought the news through the office grapevine. Frank and Sarah were in counseling. Mandatory sessions after she'd found texts between him and a coworker. Not me. Turned out I wasn't special after all. Some girl from accounting who'd started after I'd become radioactive. "He's a serial emotional cheater," Brittany from HR told me over lunch. "Sarah's told everyone. Apparently this is the third coworker he's gotten inappropriate with." The sandwich turned to ash in my mouth. My stomach clenched so hard I felt sick. All that special connection wasn't special at all. "Third?" "Yeah, there was someone at his last job, too. Sarah thought changing companies would fix it, but you can't fix someone who gets off on the attention, who needs the thrill of almost affairs to feel alive, who tells lonely wives they're special while keeping his own marriage on life support." I thought about all our coffee dates, all the times he'd said I was different, that he'd never connected with someone like this. Had he said the same things to the girl from accounting? The woman at his last job? Was I just another notch in his emotional bedpost? "I need to go," I told Brittany. Spent the rest of the day in the bathroom, throwing up my lunch and my illusions. I'd blown up my marriage for a man who collected damaged women like baseball cards, each one flattened, cataloged, and filed away until he needed the next one to feel alive, given up perfectly fine for absolutely nothing. October brought more changes. The house sold faster than expected, leaving me scrambling for an apartment. Found a one-bedroom in Cheektowaga, farther from work, but all I could afford. Ruben helped me move because of course he did. Even divorcing me, he was still reliable. "I'm seeing someone," he mentioned while carrying boxes. "Oh." "Her name's Lauren, dental hygienist. Met her at Tim's hockey game. 3 months. That's all it had taken him to move on. 11 years erased by a dental hygienist who probably didn't mind tuna casserole Thursdays and missionary position Tuesdays. "I'm happy for you," I lied. "Are you seeing anyone?" "No." "What about Frank?" "That was never—" "We weren't—" "I know. Sarah told me everything when she called, how he pursues coworkers, makes them feel special, but never actually follows through, always stops just short of physical cheating so he can claim innocence." Each word was a knife. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you threw away our marriage for a fantasy, and I want you to know that." He was right. I'd destroyed everything for coffee dates, and text messages, and the promise of something more that was never real. Frank had played me like a violin, and I'd been stupid enough to compose my own destruction. November now. The holidays approaching, and I'm spending them alone for the first time in 11 years. Ruben's probably planning traditions with Lauren, teaching her his mother's recipes, introducing her to his family, giving her the life I found suffocating but someone else might find perfect. The church friends are gone. Loyalty went with Ruben, as it should have. My coworkers are polite but distant. I'm the cautionary tale whispered about at happy hours I'm no longer invited to. Even my therapist seems tired of my inability to move forward. "You need to stop mourning Frank," Dr. Martinez said last week. "He was never yours to mourn." But how do you stop mourning something that felt more real than your actual reality? How do you accept that you gave up everything for nothing? That you were so desperate to feel alive that you let a serial emotional manipulator convince you to destroy your perfectly fine life? I see them sometimes. Ruben and Lauren at Target, looking at throw pillows. Frank and Sarah at Starbucks, him on his phone while she stares into space. Two couples making it work in different ways, while I'm alone with my regrets and my freedom that tastes like failure. Maybe their marriages are stronger for surviving. Maybe I was just a blip, a crisis they could overcome with counseling and renewed commitment. Maybe I was never as important to Frank as he was to me. Maybe I was just his distraction, his temporary escape from his own boring routine. The apartment is quiet. No tuna casseroles, no scheduled sex, no daily devotionals. Just me and the ghost of who I used to be. The good Christian wife who sang in the choir and submitted to her husband, and never once thought about kissing tattooed men in parking lots. I miss her sometimes. That woman who found joy in small things like successful potlucks and completed Bible studies, who didn't know what she was missing because she'd never tasted anything different, who thought perfectly fine was the same as happiness. But mostly I miss the woman I was for those few months with Frank, the one who laughed at inappropriate jokes and wore dresses that fit and felt desired instead of just tolerated. Even if it was all a lie, even if I was just another conquest in his collection, for a little while I was alive. Now I'm 31, divorced, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Cheektowaga, still in therapy over a man who was never mine. Ruben's in love with someone who appreciates his stability. Frank's still married, probably grooming his next target, and I'm exactly where women like me end up, alone with the knowledge that we had something perfectly fine and threw it away for the promise of something more. The cardigan still smells like his cologne. I should throw it away, but I can't. It's all I have left of the person I thought I could be, the woman who deserved more than perfectly fine, who was special enough to make a man question his marriage. Except I wasn't special. I was just available. Just another bored wife looking for meaning in coffee dates and feeling chosen by someone who chose everyone. My phone buzzes. A text from an unknown number. "Heard about your divorce. Sorry things didn't work out. Coffee sometime? F." I stare at the message, my heart racing despite everything I know. Despite Sarah's warnings and Brittany's gossip and the 3 other women who'd received similar texts. Because maybe this time would be different. Maybe I'd be the one who actually mattered. But I delete it without responding. I've already lost everything once. No need to lose it again. Instead, I pour a glass of wine, the good stuff because I can buy whatever I want now, and toast to perfectly fine. To Ruben and his dental hygienist. To Frank and his collection of almost affairs. To the woman I was and the woman I'm trying to become. Somewhere in Buffalo, church people are praying for my soul. Somewhere, Ruben is building a new life with someone who fits his mold. Somewhere, Frank is sharing coffee and secrets with another lonely wife. And I'm here, in my one-bedroom apartment, finally alone with the truth. I didn't destroy my marriage for Frank. I destroyed it for the idea of Frank. For the possibility of being more than perfectly fine. The price was everything, the reward was nothing. But at least now I know what I'm missing. And maybe that's worth something after all. Or maybe it's just another lie I tell myself, alone in this apartment that smells like regret and sounds like silence. Either way, this is where I ended up. The villain in my own story, the cautionary tale at First Baptist Buffalo, the woman who had perfectly fine and decided it wasn't enough. Turns out it was more than I deserved. Now I swallow regret like communion wine night after night. Alone. But hey, at least the coffee was good. That's the lie I keep sipping.